My dearest brothers and sisters, this is Tunia speaking. I love you so very much. Welcome to the last installment of this female supremacism series. In part 1, I argued that it's obvious white supremacism to say, white people are better in a dozen ways than black people, while black people are better at nothing except for some physical things. Hence, what your society actually says is clear female supremacism, namely, women are better in a dozen ways than men, while men are better at nothing except for some physical things. In part 2, I argue that you can't escape from female supremacist land by saying neither men nor women are better in any substantial way, anything, because everyone already correctly believes that women are better in certain substantial ways than men. If someone believes that women have substantial advantages over men, while men have no substantial advantages over women, and also men commit most of the violent and sexual crimes, then it would be entirely understandable to discriminate against men and to see men as the problem in society. To avoid that, you have to say that men and women have equal worth and value overall, and women are better in certain substantial ways than men, and men are also better in certain substantial ways than women, not just some minor ways, as we discussed in part 2. Plus, that's just simply true. In part 3, I shared 2 ways in which men are better than women. In this final part, I'll share 2 more ways in which men are better than women, plus I'll offer what I consider a positive and hopeful vision for the future. Here's one way in which men are better. Men tend to think more about how can we build a stable, long-lasting society than women do. You can view this as part of the male protector instinct. There was a recent phenomenon where women were very surprised to learn that average everyday men regularly think about the Roman Empire. Why? Because thinking about how to build a stable, long-lasting society is just something that men do, and men feel that thinking about the Roman Empire can give them some clues about how to do that. Now yes, women do think a lot about the well-being of their own family and about taking care of people who are struggling. However, this tends to be more on the personal scale than thinking about the well-being of society as a whole. Plus, as we discussed in the previous part, women's emotional goals don't always consider long-term effects or second-order effects. Now let's hug the elephant in the room. He's standing right here in the room, but no one acknowledges him publicly, and he's getting lonely. Very young boys aren't smarter than very young girls. However, from age 15 or 16 onwards, and arguably even earlier than that, men are a bit smarter than women on average. When I say smart or intelligent in this section, I'm referring to raw logical, mathematical ability. I'm not referring to spirituality, where women are more gifted. I'm also not referring to emotional intelligence or EQ, where depending on how exactly you define it, women may also be more gifted. For example, women are better at reading people and identifying emotions. Although some definitions of EQ include things that men are better at, such as emotional regulation under stress and taking accountability. Still, men are smarter. And that matters a great deal, because intelligence is very broadly useful. It helps with pretty much any task that involves dealing with the outside world. I think this also makes intuitive sense. In order to reproduce, women need to be socially skilled. They need to identify a good man and convince him to protect and provide and stick around. Meanwhile, in order to reproduce, men need to be decently smart and therefore good at dealing with the outside world, which includes being able to provide and protect. A dumb hunter probably gets killed by a wild boar, or alternatively can't protect and provide for his family. So he probably doesn't successfully reproduce. Whereas a dumb woman can reproduce just fine. People might not like that I'm using intelligence to refer to logical, mathematical ability. However, I think that's justified because it's so broadly useful. For example, someone with an above-average logical, mathematical ability has an edge when learning to play a new instrument. Similarly, above-average mathematical ability gives a person an edge when learning languages. It's an anecdote, but the most linguistically talented person this channeler knows is a math PhD. Above-average mathematical ability also gives a person an edge when inventing things or starting a new company. Logical, mathematical ability is that broadly useful. Hence, I think it's justified to just call that intelligence, keeping in mind that different people may additionally have specific talents. So, for example, Some people aren't particularly good at math, but are very musically talented. Whereas something like emotional intelligence is only relevant for dealing with emotions. Hence, it's not nearly as broad and universally applicable as intelligence is. Now, yes, people with incredibly high levels of logical, mathematical ability might not be that successful. However, in part this is because those people might just not care about certain societal niceties or about interactions with average people or about becoming successful. So to an extent, they don't become successful because they don't care about becoming successful. Plus, there are relatively few math professors. There are far more people who are merely above average at math, and they probably don't work in the local math department, yet their intelligence gives them an edge in whatever they choose to do. With all this said, let's actually prove my claim that men are smarter than women. The book Sex Differences in Intelligence, The Developmental Theory by Professor Lin shows this. Its Amazon description says that adult men have 4 points of IQ more than adult women. See source 1 in the description box under the video. A counter-argument might be, that's wrong, men and women score the same on IQ tests. Well, first of all, see that book I just mentioned. Second, keep in mind that science on your world is unreliable on any topic that's controversial, because politically incorrect findings get suppressed, and measurements will get tweaked so that politically correct results are produced. Small differences, such as gender differences in intelligence, can easily be eliminated this way. In this case, IQ tests are actually specifically constructed in such a way that men and women score the same on them. You can see source 2 and its references for a discussion. So yes, if you construct IQ tests in such a way that men and women score the same on them, then men and women score the same on them. But that doesn't prove that men and women are equally intelligent. It just means that if you construct an instrument to find an equal outcome, then you find an equal outcome. A question used in IQ tests is name as many animals as you can in 60 seconds. And women score better on that question. So that's one of the questions that is used to ensure that men and women score the same on IQ tests on average. But of course, just because women can name more animals in 60 seconds, doesn't mean that women are as good as men at logical, mathematical ability. Additionally, your IQ tests measure men in your society, who from childhood have been subjected to persistent men or thrash messaging and by your school system that is hostile to boys. Boys are also more often, medicated than girls. This can break men and cost them a few points of IQ. So even if you insist that adult men on Earth aren't smarter than adult women on Earth, well, adult men on Earth were often broken during childhood. You're measuring broken men versus less broken women. Personally, I'm not very impressed by a system that regularly breaks its boys during childhood and then says, see, men aren't smarter than women. As a second argument for why men are smarter in the logical, mathematical sense, source 3 is a 2025 paper in Nature that said that boys are better at math than girls starting in first grade, 6 to 7 years old. As a third argument, most great people, most great artists, most great inventors, most great leaders in history were men. A counter-argument might be that's because women were oppressed. Well, today the discrimination is aimed at men, and yet even today the vast majority of companies are started by men. The vast majority of inventions are done by men. The best chess players are men. The people competing for the most languages spoken record are, mostly, men. Look at pretty much any field and the top performers in that field are mostly men. Now, some people might think that because the list of best chess players is pretty much all male, that must mean that men are much smarter than women. But that's not actually true. Intelligence is a bell curve, and the way bell curves work mathematically is that the group with a bit higher average intelligence will produce a surprisingly large proportion of the truly exceptional individuals. This effect is stronger than you would intuitively expect. So for example, most new inventions are done by men, and yes, this points towards men being more intelligent, but it doesn't point towards men being hugely more intelligent. It points to men being slightly more intelligent. Also, keep in mind that the difference between men and women isn't that large, while the difference between individuals is pretty large. So there absolutely are a large number of women who are smarter than the average man. And even an average woman will frequently meet men who are less intelligent than her. So evaluate the individual rather than just thinking their gender predetermines their qualities. Still, this is important to acknowledge. For example, it definitely blows up the argument, there are fewer female CEOs, billionaires, people in this field, therefore oppression and sexism, therefore we need to discriminate against men in order to achieve equal outcomes. Well, yeah, one reason why there are fewer female CEOs, billionaires, people in certain fields is that women aren't as smart on average. That doesn't mean that excellent and very smart female CEOs don't exist. It doesn't mean that women should be discriminated against during hiring. Evaluate the individual. But this does mean that less than half of CEOs being women isn't proof of oppression or sexism. This isn't a theoretical benefit. The fewer women have this position, therefore oppression and sexism, therefore we need anti-male discrimination to achieve equal outcomes argument is used in the real world to justify anti-male discrimination. Your female supremacist society has the narrative that women have substantial gender-specific qualities and men don't, while men commit most of the violent and sexual crimes. That narrative makes it sound like men are the problem and you don't need men. But if men are actually smarter, as they are, then hey, suddenly you do need men. Suddenly men have a place in society. Suddenly men make a critical contribution to society. Suddenly men sound like they're worthy of respect. A positive vision of the future. Okay, let's describe a positive picture of a possible future, in which men and women live in harmony. What I'll be saying is in large part based on how my current society works. So it's very real and very possible. Political decisions aren't made via are we going to let the masculine, right-wing, party or the feminine, left-wing, party govern for the next 4 years? Instead, people have their needs met, so people can mostly just be left alone. And societal decisions are made with specific referenda on that topic. People understand that to make optimal decisions, you weigh up men's logical and women's emotional goal-driven approach. Neither of these perspectives is censored or labeled as worthless. Men and women have full rights. It's acknowledged that men and women are both better at some things on average. Even if individual differences are generally larger than gender-based differences. Still, men acknowledge that women are more likely to be right when it comes to, for example, certain spiritual matters or identifying emotions. And women acknowledge that men are more likely to be right when it comes to the question of how to build a thriving society, for the reasons we've discussed. It's acknowledged that on average, it's best if men focus more on becoming really good at some practical aspect of dealing with the external world, and women focus on love, on flowing, on spirituality and on their family. However, no one is forced into these roles. Men understand that helping women ultimately helps them too, and women understand that helping men ultimately helps them too. Women are still motivated by emotional goals, but one of them is actively helping men if they're struggling, even if those men aren't family or aren't likable exceptional men. Men actively work to make sure women are safe and provided for, even women who aren't part of their own family. People don't pursue my gender wins, your gender loses agendas. Men have their needs met because, among other things, they're loved and honored by women, including by women who aren't their partners or family members. Society and women are reasonable and fair towards men. And women have their needs met because, among other things, they're loved and they don't have to worry about their physical safety or being able to have a roof over their head. Men and women are secure enough in their contribution that people don't feel the need to deny that, for example, women are more spiritually gifted on average, or that men are smarter on average. Career women exist, but women without a great career don't feel insufficient. Women don't undervalue femininity, as many women currently do on Earth. Average people realize that they're average, so they shouldn't compare themselves to the most successful people in society, or demand an exceptional lifestyle, or demand a partner who is significantly above average. People don't focus on becoming the kind of person who doesn't need a man or doesn't need a woman. Instead, people focus on what they're naturally drawn to and what they're talented at, and usually that means people becoming a feminine woman or a masculine man, who has room in their life for their counterpart. The average man should focus on actually unlocking their masculine energy first before trying to integrate their feminine energy. And the average woman should focus on actually unlocking her feminine energy first too before trying to integrate their masculine energy. To be clear, most people on Earth haven't done that. A masculine man who hasn't yet integrated a lot of feminine energy, plus a feminine woman who hasn't yet integrated a lot of masculine energy, are often very attracted to each other. They might feel almost magnetically drawn together. Such people can typically have a very happy and stable and sexually fulfilling relationship, with thriving children if they choose to have them. People shouldn't be forced into this, but this is what works well for most people. Whereas a man and a woman who both have a moderate amount of masculine and feminine energy unlocked, will typically feel that they don't really need each other, and they may feel inclined to just dump their partner whenever things get a bit tough. After all, there's no strong polarity or magnetism in that relationship. Yes, such people are perhaps a bit better at being alone. But they're also more likely to be alone. So, that's roughly what Pleiadian society is like. And this is also what your society could be like, if you so choose. This way, things are just so much more loving, harmonious and flowing. Personally, I feel so happy and blessed and nourished all the time. I wish you could experience that for a while. Well, maybe you're one of few people on Earth who already is living in such a relationship. For the rest of you, hopefully that is your future. From my own perspective as a Pleiadian woman, I feel like I'm making out like a bandit. I don't work as much as my husband, yet I have everything I need in life, including safety and material comfort and friends and a loving family. Now, I actively work to make sure that my husband and our children are as happy as possible. However, I love doing that. It's not a chore for me. On the other hand, my husband is very happy himself and certainly not complaining. Except when he just wants some peace on his day off, and I'm feeling yet another itch between my legs that only his penis can scratch. But, life is hard. Or at least, certain body parts get hard so very easily. What's he going to do after I walk in on him naked and he gets an erection for the 4th time that day? Not have sex with me? Please. I wonder when he'll be home tonight? Anyway. I love you, and your thoughts are very welcome in the comments section. Your star sister, Tunia.